I mean, he'll never know the effect that that short time, in West Texas had on me.
Do you remember the first time you met Matt Damon?
Oh, wow. The first time I met him, yeah. So I did a movie. I was 18 years old. It was the first first job that I'd been able to do without my mom traveling with me, right? So I went by myself to West Texas, to Alpine, Texas, which is a small town now, but in 1994 was a much smaller town, apparently. And I was staying in a Motel 6, and I met the guy who was going to play my older brother, who was Matt Damon, who I didn't know from anything, he wasn't famous to me. He was just a guy, and he was very kind to me. And he was 26, I think, 25, 26. But you know what it's like when you're 26 and you have to hang out with this 18-year-old, But he was very cool. And the movie was called The Good Old Boys, and it was directed by Tommy Lee Jones, and it starred Frances McDormand and Terry Kinney and Sam Shepard and Wilford Brimley and all of these big, huge names. And Matt was kind enough to kind of let me tag along with him through his conversations with these people, because I was a neophyte at the very least. But I remember one of the things that really stands out to me is we were at dinner with Sam Shepard, and I knew Sam Shepard from The Right Stuff, or The Pelican Brief really is more accurate for what I knew him from at the time. But Matt was like, "Wow, so I saw your new show on Broadway, and it's just amazing." And I was like, "Oh, you write plays?" And Matt was like, "Just shut up and you might learn something. Okay, these are amazing people that were around." So he was great, and he actually was kind of the inspiration for me starting to write, because he and Ben were working on Goodwill Hunting at the time, and they were faxing back and forth notes to each other. That's how long ago it was. And I expressed interest, and Matt's like, "Well, you can read it if you want." I'm like, "Yeah, I would love that." And I read an early draft of the script, and I'm like, "You're gonna write this for you to star in?" And he's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "That's $1 million idea, because that's what I want to do. I want to be a movie star and blah, blah, blah." So I got back to LA, and I kind of did the same thing. I wrote a movie with my roommate, and somehow that movie ended up getting financed and made. And I had to take a smaller part, but to Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who played the lead. It was a movie called MANIC. But that only happened because I had worked with Matt, and I saw him writing and trying to expand his skill set and do other things other than just wait for the phone to ring. And I found that really inspiring.
How many days were you on set?
For that first one, for Good Old Boys? Well, it was just a great, great job. It was one of those things where it's like, I feel like Matt has talked later about how it was the lowest point of his young career, because he had been up for a lot of giant things, and Leo DiCaprio kept beating him out on it was like he was in this point where he was like at the lowest right before he was able to break through with mostly some of his own work, but also Rainmaker and stuff like that. But for me, it was a pinnacle, right? So it's so funny for me to be in this situation where all the actors except for Frances McDormand and Tommy Lee Jones were basically in a Motel 6. And they were all kind of like, begrudgingly there for Tommy Lee Jones because, he's great and people will do a lot of things to be in a Tommy Lee Jones movie. But for me, I was like, I felt like I won the lottery, So I was there the whole time, which was very cool. It was, like I said, it was in West Texas, and it was all horses and cowboy stuff. So I got to go out 2 weeks early and ride horses and work on roping and do all this stuff that is just kind of a dream scenario. It was like camp, and then afterwards I would get to hang out and listen to amazing stories, from Sam Shepard or Matt Damon or Frances McDormand, who's amazing and was so kind to me that I kind of look back on it. I'm like, wow, so surreal. And what a great, break into the business, really. Because I'd done a TV movie before then, but this was absolutely the biggest thing. And it meant when I left there and moved to Los Angeles that I would have an agent, that I would be in the union, that I would, all of these things that I didn't even know to worry about were taken care of because of this great job. Yeah, but I was there probably 8 weeks all told.
Do you remember what scene he showed you from the did you touch the fax paper or no? This was
Oh no, I read the whole thing. He gave me the whole thing, and it used to be a spy movie. And it's kind of crazy, but I always talk about it when I'm talking about screenwriting, about how things change, how the process is so organic, right? But the original version of Goodwill Hunting that I read, at least, was kind of a spy movie about, and there's a scene in Goodwill Hunting where Will is interviewing with the CIA and they're like, why are you reluctant to sign with us? And he was like, why? Because what if I crack a code and this happens and this place gets bombed and blah, 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 blah. And that whole spiel, that was the plot of the movie, the original movie. And the story that Matt has told, I don't think he told me this, I think he said this on TV or something, but I was very interested about how that became the Goodwill Hunting that we know. And he said that Rob Reiner read the script and was like, this is good, I like all of it, but what you should do is focus on the friendship. And they were like, well, we already sold this movie though. And he's like, yeah, nobody cares anymore though. They own it and they want to make it, so make it something that they're excited to make. I mean, that's not really my story, that's Matt's, but yeah, the version that I read was absolutely a spy movie, and then I saw the trailer and I'm like, well, this has gone through some changes.
And that taught you about the business too, obviously, I'm sure. Or maybe you didn't realize it at the time, but there'll be so many iterations of something.
Absolutely, and like things change on a dime, and like that is something that I keep learning. I keep relearning this fact of like, you know, you write a script with a certain person in mind, and then that person can't do it. So then you have another person who's also a very talented person, but very different than that person. Or okay, script is now different. The story is now different, right? There's no version where, you know, these 2 or 3 or 5 actors that you've thought about are going to do it the same, right? You have to acknowledge who they are as well as what the script says in order to, you know, make it happen. I mean, we did 6 Month Rule ages ago, you know, and it was originally, we were speaking to Rachel Lee Cook about the lead role, and she's around my age, you know, and it was like, that was kind of what the script was. And then that didn't work out, and we went and I had just done a TV show with Natalie Morales, who's amazing and great, and I was like, we'd be lucky to get her, and so we made this offer, and we got her, and then I realized throughout the next couple of days, because, you know, you get really frantic about casting, right? It's like, we have to do it, you know, we don't want to do too much research. Anyways, I find out that she's much younger than me. You know, she's at least 10 years younger than me, and I was like, oh, well, that kind of changes so many things in the movie. And so we had to acknowledge it. We can't just pretend that that's not a thing, right? And so suddenly, you know, Natalie becomes this role of Sophie, and then we have to figure out what the movie is now, right? We can't just keep going on the same path that we were on, you know? Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm.
But it's always changing. It's always has to stay organic and alive, because the moment that you start saying, no, this is what I decided to do in my bedroom when I was writing it, you know, or when I was meeting with the DP, this is what we decided, that's when the movie stops being alive and starts being a little stale, I think.
When you looked at the script for Goodwill Hunting, which at that time was a spy film,
right.
What feedback did you provide Matt Damon?
Oh, I wasn't anywhere near a point where I could do something like that. I think about my youth and coming up, and, you know, I deal with a lot of young actors now. I do some teaching at a university, and so I interact with 18, 19, 20-year-olds all the time, and I'm constantly like, I can't believe I was working, you know, on my own without any parental, you know, guidance or whatever at that age. I was so dumb. I was so dumb. And it's like, you just don't know what you don't know, right? And I certainly wouldn't have ever thought to give a note or anything. I mean, he asked for them, and I'm like, I don't know, like, this is great. Like, this is the first movie script I've ever read that was written by somebody I know. If you think about it that way, I grew up doing theater. I would audition for TV and movies all the time, but like, the writer was something that I never thought I could be, because it was so special. And you had to be a genius to do something like that. So when I read that first script, it was the first thing that made it attainable and something that wasn't the Wizard of Oz kind of stuff. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. It was the first chance where I saw him like, Matt's a regular guy. He's a smart guy. He's an articulate guy. But I also don't feel like he's some genius that, dropped out from heaven and, he's just a guy. And that made it kind of attainable for me of like wanting to write more and chasing that dream. But yeah, I didn't offer him any notes. I was just like, awesome, this is great, really good. Can I audition for it?
How long after that did you see him have success with the film?
Well, I got a good story about that actually, because I ended up, I was going to acting school right before I did the Western. And I did the Western, and then I was surrounded by, again, Sam Shepard, Matt Damon, Sissy Spacek, Tommy Lee Jones, who went to Harvard, all these people who knew all about all kinds of stuff, like not just acting. They knew like everything. They were having these intellectual discussions at dinner that I was totally lost by, and I was like, all right, I don't want to just study acting. I want to study everything. I want to, Matt was going to Harvard, and I'm like, I want to do that. I want to be one of the smart people at the table. So I left New York, which is where the acting school was, and I came to LA, and I signed up for Santa Monica College, and I did a couple of years there, and I ended up transferring to UCLA, and I got a degree in English and political science, and like something completely different than acting, because I wanted to expand my life. I wanted to know about more stuff than just Stanislavski and Meisner and all of that jazz, which is very important and I love, but I just wanted to have a deeper well to pull from. But I'm at UCLA. I'm there in Westwood Village, and me and my roommate had gone up there to run some errands and play some video games. So I had a bag of Tide that I had just purchased, and we saw that the premiere of Goodwill Hunting was happening, and they were, about to let out. And I turned to my buddy Mike, and I'm like, I know that guy. I know Matt. Like, we're friends. We did this movie together like 2 or 3 years ago. And he's like, whoa, we should hang out. And so the movie let out, and we're like behind the security guys and looking around, and Robin Williams walks by, and I'm like, wow, that's so cool. And then I kind of took one too many steps towards the door, and the security guy kind of pushed me back, and I'm like, ugh, I hate that. I'm like, I'm embarrassed now, let's just leave. And my buddy's like, no, we should stay. So we stayed a few more minutes, and then Matt came out, and I was behind probably 7 people, stacked pretty deep. And I did one of these things, and he caught my eye, and he was on top of the world, and he was like, hey, little brother. And he pulled me in, and he's like, gave me a hug. He's like, are you going to this party? I'm like, no, man, I literally was just, he's like, you're going to this party. So he drags me into the limousine with himself and his mom and Minnie Driver, and they're just all like, talking about how great the movie is. They had not seen the movie yet, and they were, very excited about it. And I'm sitting there, I've got a bag of Tide under my feet, so the whole limousine smells like, Tide detergent. And I've got like ripped jeans on, and I'm like, don't know what to say. I'm just like, the trailer looks really good, man. Yeah, I bet it's good. Anyways, we drove around the corner to this very, very fancy wrap party that the studio had thrown for them. And I didn't want to be a hanger-on. I didn't want to like infringe on him any more than I had. So I was just like, I'm not going in. Just thank you for inviting me. Like, that's so cool. Such a great guy. So unnecessary, and I just went back and I played video games that night. And my buddy's like, why didn't you go? I'm like, I feel like the story is that he wanted me to go. You know what I mean? As opposed to me wandering around not knowing anybody at a premiere party and with my bag of Tide. But it was great. It was a great moment for me. But yeah, and since then I've been super fan. I love everything that he does. I think he's incredibly talented and smart.
And also you saw that writing your own project and trying to get it made.
I mean, he'll never know the effect that that short time, in West Texas had on me. But But I think that's, you know, when you, in this business, it's always these short amount of times in West Texas or LA or location, wherever, right? And you can really, I've learned that the effect that you can have on other people is dramatic, because a lot of people don't get to make movies. It's pretty rare for most people to be on a movie set. And just because it's our kind of bread and butter and we do it a lot, it doesn't mean that that's how it is for the entire cast and crew. And I always think about the effect that those people had on me. You know, they made me want to be smarter. They made me want to be more educated. They made me want to take my craft more seriously. And this is all just because we would get together for dinner and they were kind to me and they would sit and talk and I would listen and I would be like, wow, that's who I want to be. You know, I thought I wanted to be, you know, whatever the movie star was in, you know, 1995 or whatever. But instead, I'm like, I want to be the person who goes from Broadway stage to, you know, deep indie drama to cowboy movie to, you know, which is the kind of stuff that Frances McDormand was doing. Like, you know, right after that, Fargo came out. And she'd already done it. And I was like, this is amazing. You have already done an Oscar-winning performance. And then you came and you did this small, low-budget, you know, Western. And then you go and accept your award for Fargo. But they're all kind of heroes to me.